Hello, and welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas into what it means to live as a follower of Jesus in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Here's your host, Lauren Richmond Jr.
Hey, and thanks for listening in to the Future Christian Podcast. My name is Lauren Richmond Jr., and I am pleased to be joined by Kathy Escobar. Hello.
Hi, good to be with you.
Hey, thanks for being here. Kathy is co-pastor at the Refuge, a Christian community and mission center in North Denver, and she juggles the realities of parenting 4 young adult children in the U.S. and then grieving the loss of your youngest son late in 2019. As a parent, I can only imagine. So prayers and peace to you and your family there. So you're co-director with your husband of Community Heals, Faith, Making Space for Transformation, accessible to all. You're an advocate for friends in hard places, a trained spiritual director, an organizational consultant, and you love to teach and facilitate events, workshops, retreats, and groups. So anything else you want to say about yourself or add for our listeners?
Well, that's plenty. That's plenty. I mean, but the books that I've written all are in that stream of just the journey, transformation, healing, church, community, practice. So that's kind of my thing, is practice most of all.
So tell our listeners, if you would, a little bit kind of about your faith journey and what Christianity meant to you, maybe in your early, however far you want to go back, and what it looks like today for you.
Well, I mean, of course, that's a long conversation, but
Sure.
What's most significant probably is that I was not raised as a Christian.
Okay.
That was not in my family of origin. My mom was a single mom, and my dad was a lifelong alcoholic. They were divorced. And so our family was really dysfunctional in lots of typical ways. But I coped by being good and top marks, performance, peacemaker. The reason why I say that is that I know how to do that well. And I became a Christian kind of in a pure way through someone giving me a little Bible, and I was young and open, and I was drawn to Jesus, and it helped me. It did. There was something about Jesus that was a little bit like a moth to a flame. I just really was drawn, and it was really pure. Because I didn't go to church. So I didn't really have some of the structures until later. And when later just means that then I started going to kind of conservative evangelical types of church. My undergrad is from Pepperdine University, which is Church of Christ. Yeah. And so that's where I would say kind of like a funnel, sort of. I came from a wide experience and then had sort of the narrow years where things became a little more rigid. And I did really good with it, to be honest. I was looking for rails. I was looking for boundaries. I was looking for right and wrong. I was looking for some things I didn't get in my family. Yeah. The problem ended up happening with me, and kind of where it lands me today, is that I had a split between what was inside in my story of reality, of pain and shame and insecurity and just normal human experiences, and a way of coping with it through performing. And I learned that in my family, but then I really learned it in my Christian faith. I was like the best good Christian woman. And I was doing good on the outside and not on the inside. So years ago, it's been 27 years now, I ended up in a small group in San Diego at a conservative church that had a whole different way of approaching community that was a lot more honest. Yeah. And raw and real. And it kind of was the beginning of what I would call a shift in my faith. I knew that I just couldn't keep following all the rules, but I didn't know how to change it. And I just knew that I needed to become more honest. And as the more honest I got in church, the more on the outs of churches I got.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so, you know, the more healing, the more I was calling people to more authenticity and connection and true stories, the more it was like, could you stop doing that? We want people to serve more instead of heal deep parts of our story. So that was kind of my work for a long time. And then I ended up landing on a mega church staff a chunk of years ago, and it's been 16 years now, almost 17. And in that was, I would just say, the culmination of just the grind against the system for that long. And what happened to me is kind of all issues of patriarchy, hierarchy, unhealthy systems, power, just kind of all came apart. And when that happened, I stopped being so good. That's what happened. The systems liked me to be good. And when I wasn't and started speaking out, I found myself in a free fall out. And what I call that in my book, Faith Shift, is just an unraveling where kind of everything came apart. Like I did so good for so long, and then it just all stopped working, and losing beliefs, and then the structures that support those beliefs, and then the relationships in them, and then my identity. So the last 14 and a half years have really been on the outside of traditional structures. And I would just say that I'm still a Christian because I really truly value the downward ways of Jesus. But when people ask me, are you a Christian? I do say, it depends on what you mean by that question. I don't just go, because there's a lot that I don't hold to anymore because I think it's unhealthy, and I can't personally have the integrity to proclaim certain things that I used to be really committed to when I was fused in that unhealthy system.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying kind of about your honesty and authenticity. I think one of my memories as a kid is like my parents fighting on the way to church, and then, once you walk in the doors, like the switch flipped, and it was like, hey, we're a happy, smiling, good family of Jesus lovers, and I think about too, you kind of mentioned your experience like in a mega church. It brings to mind, like, I don't know if you see it, Kathy, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, like how Christianity is almost like a status symbol. Like, if you're being a good Christian, like you're going to be like always happy. You're going to have like material success. You're going to have maybe not wealthy, but like you can be doing okay for yourself. Is that fair?
Well, oh, totally. I mean, it's that's why I have a theology of descent that is going downward into real problems, real pain. And the truth is that the modern, at least evangelical contemporary church has been a model of ascent. And so it's rising, it's power, it's status, it's privilege, it's us against them. It's the pretty and the popular make it to the top. It's that certain, if you say the right thing, do the right thing, be the right thing, then you're okay. If you're not, then, it's basically completely, in my opinion, contrary to Jesus. It's that simple. I feel kind of clear on that personally for me and what I value. I just think they're contradicting values.
Yeah, it brings to mind, I'm curious are you familiar with Marlena Graves? I had her on season 4, and her book is The Way Up is Down, and she kind of writes through this theme of kenosis. And I wonder if you two might connect. It seems like there's a lot of resonance between your ways of thinking if you don't know her.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I think that name is familiar, but I'm not familiar with that book.
Well, talk about, if you would, a spiritual practice that's been meaningful for you, or you might recommend to others.
Well, for me, I mean, spiritual practices are not the same as they used to be. So they've really shifted over many years. I would say that the
Mm-hmm.
two that for me are the most spiritual and soul filling and connecting is being outside in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So anything outside. And my son Jared, who died in 2019, he had a quote. It was like, "Everything is better outside,"
Yeah.
and that is just feels really true for me. That I'm most connected to God and others and my soul when I'm outside. And
Yeah.
then the other spiritual practice that I always just personally value is just meaningful conversations with
Mm.
people. So community and connection as a spiritual practice is really healing to me. It's kind of why COVID is so extra hard, but we've
Yeah.
found ways to make that happen because it is an experience of God through people.
Yeah. Well, I'll say during COVID, this podcast has been very meaningful for me as I think, a spiritual practice. So I hope this conversation is equally as edifying, I guess we might say, to you as well.
Yeah, it's fun to hang out. I mean, it's good. Human connection is a great
Yeah.
thing. Just talking about faith and life.
I will say I just came back from a walk outside as we're recording this. It's the middle of December, and I think I hadn't been outside for more than driving around since like Sunday, and it's Thursday, and I needed it, and feeling a little better for sure.
Good.
It's not like we haven't all said it enough lately. These are unprecedented times. COVID-19 has upended the way we do life, community, and church. As church leaders, we find ourselves disoriented. Outreach, connection, cultivating a sense of team among church staff and creatives, nothing works like it did before. Torn Curtain Arts gets it, and we're here to help. We strengthen the creative soul of churches. It's why we exist. And in these times, we have dedicated ourselves to helping churches set up live streaming solutions and assisting with live events. We also provide coaching for worship leaders, as well as substitute worship leading for both in-person and online events. Contact us at torncurtainarts.org and let's chat about how we can keep you connected to your creativity in this season and grow your community.
Well, let's talk about your work as co-pastor of the Refuge. And like you said, you kind of came from working in a mega church experience, and you kind of alluded to some of it. You kind of spoke to some of the systems and structures that were really problematic. What kind of pushed you, I don't know, if over the edges, or kind of said, "Hey, I need to do something different," and this is really why I need to do it?
Well, a couple of things about the formation of the Refuge that is important to know is that it's really evolved. So, what it is today is not what it was 14 years ago. And I think when we first planted the Refuge, and I planted with a team and
Mm-hmm.
another co-pastor, and we did it together with the dream of kind of an inclusive and non-hierarchical community,
Yeah.
healing community. And
Yeah.
my background has been in 12-step recovery and healing.
Okay.
Soul care stuff for many years as a volunteer and personally, and then when I was on staff at Big Church. So I was the associate care pastor and then the adult ministry pastor at the big church that I worked at. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we planted the Refuge, it was a little bit like people wanted to be part of maybe a mini mega church where you got a little more access to all the people, but some of the same elements. And that just wasn't our heart. Our heart was actually creating something where people did not come for the music,
Mm-hmm.
the teaching, or the kids program. Okay. And this is still true about the
Yeah,
Refuge.
that's it. That's mega church right there.
Well, and that's not just mega church.
Yeah, you're right.
Almost
You're
every church.
not wrong. Yeah.
And so it's like the emphasis gets put on music, teaching, kids. And we wanted it to be that people wanted to come to actually be together in healing community with other humans and across all of our differences. And this has been preserved all these years at the Refuge, many years. And we did start kind of as a weekly community. We had a few little things on other days. We had a house community that's still going all these years later that was part of the Refuge. But what we found is over years is we evolved into what we are today, which is far more the bigger dream that I always had. And that is that we're a Christian community and a mission center, Christian community and mission center. And actually a lot of people at the Refuge don't identify as Christian. Because they've had a faith deconstruction, they have kind of bombed out of traditional structures. They never fit in, or that was just never their thing. But their desire is for a place to get healing community and a place for social action. So we're kind of a hub for healing community and social action. So that evolved over many years. And one of the things that has been always present, though, is flat leadership. So we've always co-pastored and on a team. And that team now, this many years later, we have really solid teams. And while I a certain role, everything is done in community. So like we make decisions as teams, we have consensus, team stuff, and anybody can play. So lots of our gatherings, for example, anybody can lead and anyone can participate. They're very highly participatory, experiential, and action-oriented and practice-oriented. Awesome. And so that's evolved. It wasn't like that at the beginning. And the more weird stuff we did, the less people who came. But the cool part is then it stabilized, and then the people who were there really wanted to be there. And, I always say this, I was like, there's nowhere else. I love the Refuge. We're just celebrating our 15-year birthday on April 1st of 2021,
awesome.
Which is exciting. And I am excited for the next 15. And I always just tell people, I have nowhere else to go and nowhere that I'd rather be. It's amazing people, and we have always had people who basically are disabled, alone, on Social Security disability, living on a very limited income, some living in cars outside, mixed in with people who are lawyers and professionals and therapists and everything in between. And that is the beauty of our community, is that it's just very, very raw and across a lot of traditional differences. And the one thing it's, and this is the part of recovery, is at 12-step meetings, you get that kind of diversity because you're desperate. Yeah. And I would say a lot of the Refuge, I'm there because I'm desperate for this kind of raw, authentic and action-oriented community. And I think a lot of people are in the same place. There aren't a lot of options. And so it feels like, I don't have to be comfortable. Everyone's uncomfortable and awkward at the Refuge all the time. And that's part of in our ethos of just living with that. We actually we are a distracting environment and an awkward environment. And I came from kind of a theory that was making it distraction free and comfortable for everybody. And so we're just kind of like the antithesis of that.
I heard two things that I'm curious to hear more on, if you're willing to share. One, you kind of talked about how the Refuge has kind of been like a home for spiritual refugees, and you certainly have wrote about it in your Faith Shift book. I'm also hearing kind of how it's been a place of refuge, again, to use your word, for folks who have traditionally find themselves on the outs because of disability, social status, whatever. So I don't know if you want to tackle both of those, but I am curious just to hear more, because I know that's a thing that churches are often trying to get, is they want to become more open to the doubters. They want to become more open to people who are on the outs of society, or tend to be. And it seems like you've done that really well at the Refuge. So I'm curious to hear more.
Well, I think biggest thing, and I would kind of go back again to 12-step meetings and the power of simple and the power of shared and the power of no hierarchy. So even that language, we're trying to reach those people, is actually really, in my opinion, kind of Christian typical,
Yeah,
which
that's fair.
is power over. And I learned this early on in the Refuge through some friends as it's changed. The title of their nonprofit has changed, but it used to be called Center for Transforming Mission in Tacoma. And we talked about prepositions, and that the prepositions 2 and 4 are super typical for most Christian missions. And, 2 is doing things to people, it's patriarchal, it creates oppression. And then doing things for people is matriarchal and creates codependence, and is probably the most typical these days. And that the power of with, which is incarnational, and it creates transformation. And that's where, instead of someone over and under, we're going to reach those people that just that alone means they're under. And so just when it's equal and dignity, equal value and dignity is really missing, in my opinion, in Christian models. And I would just say too, I mean, this growth thing, and down we go. I have a chapter. It's called "We May Look Like Losers." I mean, we're actually supposed to look like losers, not winners.
Wow.
And that is, none of the church planting things teach that.
No.
And so that is actually, in my opinion, probably one of the biggest missing things. And I think what I keep observing in the bigger church, because we're now almost 15, so we've been at this a long time. We've seen a lot of churches come and go.
Yeah.
Try all kinds of interesting things.
Yep.
But I think what a lot of them haven't tried is just the simplest thing of just basic friendship and relationship as the most forming thing that people need. And I think that it's because it's one of the hardest things to do. It's actually easier to pop up a service and some of that stuff than it is to actually live with each other. Right. Because it's messier. We like our roles, and we like this is what I'm supposed to do in the world, and those kinds of things. And when we really just begin to see each other like chairs around in a 12-step recovery meeting, where no one really cares if you're a business person or you live in your car. They just care that you're there to get sober, get healed, work stuff, and share your experience, strength, and hope. And the Refuge was built on that and continues to be built on that. And I think that that's a piece of why we're not big. We don't have a huge budget. We don't have power in the way that a lot of other communities do, but we've lasted a long time with a lot of the same people. We have new people all the time, but we have people who've been here from the very beginning. And I think that that's been something really compelling. We've never had like a big turnover of a bunch of people. We have a mix, and new people always coming across all ages and experiences.
Well, Kathy, you know this probably a lot better than I do, but from what I know, Denver is I feel like Mecca's, I can't think of a better word, but it's the place to be if you want to come start a church. Everyone's like, we got to start a church in Denver, and you've probably seen so many come and go. I can only imagine.
Oh my gosh, no, and I have really funny stories because
go for it.
One is in my neighborhood. So I live in a really resource neighborhood in Arvada. Okay. And nobody here really needs that much in terms of those kinds of resources. So a church came here, and they brought like 85 people to plant a church in my neighborhood. Yeah. And then the funny part of the story is that I read something in the paper about them, and this is not to dismiss, they don't have a part to play. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this is fascinating to me, because they brought all these people, all this money. It's not a cheap part of town, and in terms of rents, and our school, like my kids went to that school. And so when there were signups for like volunteer needs, like literally if I didn't sign up within 5 minutes, every spot was full. That's how much
Wow.
like parent participation there was. And their big thing that they touted was, oh, we're taking care of teacher appreciation at the school.
Yeah.
And I can't even think of one thing that this community needed less of than that. I mean, there's not a need for that from that community.
Yeah.
And then I think of all these nonprofits, people who are serving people who live outside, people who are trying to work on housing, people who are trying to work on domestic violence, on Black Lives Matter, on things that are truly breaking down important things that need to shift and be healed and built into healthier structures. No one's doing that because, I should say no one, all those people, imagine if they came in and said, nonprofits, what can we do to support you? Instead of a school that has 5 minutes and every single role is taken by resourced parents. And this is exactly it. And they did build something. And I don't even really know what they're doing, but I know that people go. And I am sick about that personally, because there's all these other groups that are in the trenches scraping.
Yeah.
And the resources are there. And this is a two different models of where the value is. And I don't want to dismiss people's work or what they feel like God is calling them to.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing that when I hear of people wanting to come move to Boulder to plant a new church, what's missing is all the needs and Boulder doesn't really need that. Honestly. And so what it does need is all these on the ground people working in hard places, getting support from the body of Christ in a healthy way that isn't, we're coming to come save you. What do you need? And how can we listen and learn from you and help you do what you are so good at and we actually suck at, because we know how to pop up a church.
Yeah. It reminds me of what I'm hearing from you, Kathy, is I've been studying recently asset-based community development.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of similarities there, right, with your work and that kind of model.
Oh, for sure. Because in ABCD, it comes from the stories. And instead of people saying, here's what we think we need to do, it's listening. It's grassroots, faith-based organizing. It's basically coming from the bottom of saying what's really on the ground and what are the needs. And they turn out to be totally different than what kind of 2 and 4 and a power up mentality or an ascent mentality seems to bring.
Yeah, well, you have really laid out some good kind of quotable things here. The prepositions of the 2 and 4 versus the with that's gold. And then I love the supposed to look like losers, not winners. That's great.
Well, we will look like losers. I know this personally.
Kathy, I'm curious to hear. I know a lot of churches strive to they have a worshiping community in the traditional sense. It's kind of what you'd imagine the Sunday morning, and whether it's more evangelical in tone or more traditional in tone, there's still kind of the focus on the preaching and the music and the children's. And a lot of churches want to develop a more missional side. Thinking about your community and how you've kind of leaned into being a mission center, I'm curious, do you think it's possible really to do both well, or do you think churches will inevitably kind of just lean towards one or the other?
Well, I think you naturally lean towards one or the other. And I think most people and systems lean towards the path of least resistance. And so it is easier to do a worship service than it is to become an incarnational community. I think I have a post, and this is in Down We Go also, but I have a post on my blog that it's, cultivating communities, not building churches, and so they're two different things. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think what the but I do think it's possible. I've seen so many communities become, over the past 14 years, become more missional and incarnational. But they usually took a big hit to do it. They
Yeah.
lost people. They lost big donors. They lost sometimes their facility. They lost things that actually they held dear to get there. And I mean, I'm super, like, this is just one way. I mean, I'm not saying everything should be the Refuge. That's just our unique expression.
Sure.
But I think the question I think needs to get asked, what does the world really need right now? What does my neighborhood really need right now? Not what are our skills or we know how to do. What does the need really need? And I personally, and COVID's going to test this also. Like, I'm not sure people really need another Sunday service right now. When now they're all going to be more accessible. It doesn't mean that Sunday services aren't important. We have a Sunday gathering, but probably a frame for us is our Sunday gathering is one equal part of all the other things. If you look at the Refuge calendar. And so people can connect in all those ways versus a big funnel point. Everything has to get funneled through there. And then there's smaller things. Ours is divided. The hub is the best way. Things are hubbed out of there and they're all equal. They're just different. And so that's why sometimes people come to our Sunday gatherings and go, is this what the Refuge is? And it's just a little slice of the Refuge. There's actually many other things going on in different ways. So I just think the attractional, missional conversation has been going on. I don't even like the word missional. I don't really like the word mission center, but it helps people understand that we do care for people because that is one of our core things. We have a free cafe and a lot of unresourced people are able to come. But I think on the whole, I like incarnational better. Or relational or healing. And I think that the idea when we think attractional, we will take a path that will automatically make missional / incarnational not as possible.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So that's just me. It doesn't mean it can't be a both and, but the energy is going to go that direction towards the attractional because our survival often depends on numbers. And so that's a little bit of the dilemma. And the bravest people, in my opinion, are the ones who are willing to, if they feel that call. There's people who are called to attractional churches. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but the people who are truly called to incarnational work need to understand, in my opinion, like you can't use the measures from attractional and missional. They're not the same measures.
Yeah. Well, that is some great points here. And I'm glad you brought up the thing about COVID, because that was something I was going to ask you about is, it's December and COVID is still going nuts. There's talk about a vaccine. And I don't know if you've seen the news, Kathy, on Colorado's vaccine front. Like, it looks like it won't be widely available to the public until summer. Interesting enough, my wife is a nurse and she just got her first shot yesterday, I think. So,
good.
Fingers crossed.
I'm glad to hear that.
But you talked about how what people really don't need right now is another worship service, kind of like we don't need another Zoom meeting. But I mean, I'm curious. So you've been doing this for 15 years, and at least the Refuge, you have a lot more ministry experience than that behind you. So you've seen a few things. You've seen probably 9/11, how that affected churches, the Great Recession, and I don't know how far back. That's as far back as my adult memory goes. So someone's at the door. I'm curious, how do you see at home, doing this at home with kids and dogs? So listeners,
this is life now, and it's just part of it. No big deal.
How do you see, I'm really curious your thoughts, because I'm curious myself, what is church going to look like post-COVID? And do you see the Refuge as being a model that churches are going to have to adapt to? I mean, I'm curious. What do you think?
Well, I just think, I mean, I don't think that the Refuge is necessarily a model that churches need to adapt to, but I would
Mm-hmm.
say that I truly believe this. I will say it like I'll stand on tables for it, is that the church needs to be more creative. It's
Yeah.
really lacking in creativity, and so I can say, it's okay for me to say this. This is just me. I have really strong opinions about this, and I never want to dismiss the good work of people who are doing what they really are supposed to do. But
Yeah.
I think the default to just a weekly service and
Mm-hmm.
putting all the energy there is just not what the world really needs. And
Yeah.
so I think the world needs practice, and it needs tangible. It needs hands and feet. It needs hearts. It needs space. It needs advocates. I call it in Down We Go, and I think this is in practicing also, little pockets of love, where there
Mm-hmm.
really truly are little pockets of love where people are really cared for. And I think COVID points to this, and this is why I've been personally distraught about watching, on the whole, the adaptation of church to online. Is that doesn't mean
Hmm.
that people are not getting cared for and we don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think way more emphasis has been put on still doing a weekly production
Yeah.
instead of gathering people in smaller pockets that are more interactive. People want more, in my opinion, than the future church needs to
Yeah.
be more experiential, and it needs
Mm-hmm.
to be more communal and more
Mm-hmm.
honest. And
Yeah.
and so people are just done, and then more active, so not passive, and
Yeah.
so not just coming to consume and then you go home. I mean, that's why a lot of people are leaving church. They're like, I don't really need to sit there anymore. I want to go advocate for justice. I want to go
Yeah.
march. I want to go serve. I want to go
Mm-hmm.
do things that are meaningful, that the world really needs. And so I think the future after COVID is going to be super fascinating, because
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there will be reality. It'll take a while to shake up, is to
Mm-hmm.
see if people actually do come back to a Sunday service
Yep.
regularly,
Yeah.
and if what it will look like to actually make the transition to, are we really gonna, what did we learn from this, that's not
Mm-hmm.
just, oh, we learned that people could watch church online. I mean, that's not that good of
Yeah.
a learning, and we need a little better than that. Like, what have we learned? And I think one of the things that we have learned, I hope, is that people are really disconnected and longing
Yeah.
for meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
I think, you guys do pub theology, conversations and
Mm-hmm.
serving and caring for people and caring about issues together, and spiritual formation that is active and not static.
Yeah. So good. So good. I want to keep going on this, but I want to respect your time. So let's pause real quick, so I can put in a break, and we'll come back with our closing questions.
Okay.
Is the church really dying, or is it dying to change? How can the church recapture what it was in the first century? A distinctive confessional community willing to stand against the status quo, to speak up against the empire, and to stand for the gospel. How can it do this in a 21st century context? This year, the Festival of Homiletics invites you into a conversation around how the promise of the gospel might shape hope and ministry for the future of the church. What is the role of preaching in forming the church of the future? Be inspired by God's word proclaimed by some of the nation's finest ministers and teachers. Experience the fellowship of hundreds of preachers. Learn and worship in an atmosphere that is dynamic, friendly, nurturing, and prophetic. Come renew, refresh, and recharge your spirit. Join the Festival of Homiletics this spring for the 29th Annual Preaching Conference. It will be broadcast virtually the week of May 17th to the 21st, 2021, and is free to all who register. Enjoy over 30 sessions from some of the best practitioners in the business: Michael Curry, Kate Bowler, Diana Butler-Bass, Otis Moss II, Brian McLaren, Marilyn Robinson, Adam Russell Taylor, and so many more. Register for free today at festivalofhomiletics.com.
All right. We're back with Kathy Escobar, and Kathy, you can take these closing questions as seriously or not as you'd like to. But if you're Pope for a day, what does that day look like? What do you want to do? That kind of thing.
Well, that was a hard one because I don't believe in hierarchy.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you could be. Several people have just suggested just straight abolishing the popehood.
Well, I'd start there. Yeah, I would start there. And then I guess if I could, then I would say, let's break it all up. Let's actually take a year off of every single thing we ever did completely. And see what emerges when it's all like really like we're not going to do anything the way that we did it. And
you want to go like antitrust on the
pretty much
Catholic
break
Church,
it all
then.
up, break it all up, and but preserve some good things. I mean, there's good things that happen, but just be willing to burn it down to build up something that is for this time and place.
Wow,
that's
we
me.
We could spend another hour talking about that. That is a lot to unpack there, but we don't have time.
I have lots of Catholic friends, and I respect you. So, like, I feel weird saying bad things about the Pope.
Yeah. A theologian or historical Christian figure you'd want to meet or bring back to life.
Oh, goodness. Oh gosh, that's a hard one in this moment. I don't know. My brain is not going there very easily. I would say historical right now. I would maybe consider both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. both together.
Yeah, I like it.
To listen and learn from both of them because they both brought, sometimes conflicting, but actually same stream and get wisdom for what we might need for this next chapter.
Like it. What do you think history will remember from our current time and place?
History is going to remember our poor response as the United States to coronavirus. And history is going to remember the damage done in the division that's been created through social media and red and blue and just this us and them and like basically false information. It's going to remember fake news. And the damage that fake news, that messaging has created where people don't know anything to believe anymore. I think that's going to be a bad part of history that it's going to remember. Yeah.
Something more hopeful. What do you hope for the future of Christianity?
You know what I hope for? I hope for courage to be more creative. And the downward ways of Jesus, turn down power, toppling systems, unconformance, not conforming to the ways of the world, but actually living out something different. And that small and simple is valued. That's what I hope the future brings, is like breaking down this business model and getting more creative, innovative, moving from hierarchical systems to living systems, which is my friend Pam Wilhelm's work, and just really healthier, breaking down the destructive industrial complex that Christianity has begin and get back to some of its roots and in a new way, not try to go back. We just have to move forward. I think that's part of the problem too. It's like, we have to do all these things from way back there. I mean, I think everything in the Bible was contextual. So we're supposed to apply it to today and better. And so creativity and courage and innovation.
Great. Well, where can people find out more about you and your books?
Well, if you go to kathyescobar.com, I mean, it's kind of a hub for most of the things that I do. So there's, it's kind of the books I've written and I've written on the blog for a long time. This conversation was a lot about church. And so there's a ton of things over my dreams for church over the years. Not so much in this past couple of years. I haven't written all that much in that area, but kathyescobar.com is the best place. And then it kind of has links to other things.
Awesome. Well, Kathy, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate this conversation. And peace to you and your family during this tumultuous time.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. It was great being with you, and thank you for your work on Dreaming About Future Church.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. To learn more about Lauren or the podcast, visit future-christian.com. But hey, before you go, do us a favor, subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It really helps us get the word out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.